I was in a conversation with a group of teacher mentors, and one of the teachers asked me a question that really stuck with me. It was a great question. They said, "I'm starting to hear students push back on using AI because of the environmental impact. How should we respond to that?" I'll be honest with you, that is a great question. In fact, it might be one of those most important kinds of questions we hear from students right now because it tells us that they're not just using technology, they are thinking about it. So today, I would like to walk through this together. Not to give a final answer, but to add some clarity to a conversation that's getting a lot more attention, and a conversation where some of the variables are changing faster than we can wrap our heads around them. Let's start with what we do know. AI uses energy, a lot of it. Training large models takes significant computing power. Running those models, especially at scale, means data centers, servers, cooling systems, and continuous electricity use. That is real, and that's not something we should dismiss. If the student says, "Hey, I'm concerned about the environmental impact of AI," that's the kind of thinking that we want. We want students to think about these things. But we also need to help them understand what that actually means. One of the biggest challenges with this conversation is that we use words like kilowatts and megawatts. While you might understand the concepts around those words, most of us don't really feel what those mean. So let's make it a little more tangible. A kilowatt is basically a measure of power on how fast energy is being used. A megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts. That's a big jump. A typical home might use something like 1 to 2 kilowatts at any given moment, depending on what's running. So when you hear that a data center is using 20 megawatts, that's like tens of thousands of homes using electricity all at the same time. Think about it. Now, that's not exact, but it gives you a picture. Now, compare that to something like a single AI interaction. A simple text prompt uses a very small amount of energy on its own. But here's the key. When you multiply that by millions or billions of interactions happening every day, that's where the impact starts to show up. An individual use is very small. The system that supports all of us using it, that's where the impact lives. And then there's the physical side of it. Some of these data centers are massive, not just one building, but entire campuses. Think about something like a Walmart supercenter. That's already one of the largest buildings most people see on a regular basis. Now imagine a facility that could cover the space of, say, 10, 20, or even more Walmart supercenters. And when you add in things like structures, support systems, expansion areas, that's the scale we're talking about in some cases. Now, not every data center is that large, but many are trending in that direction. And all of those buildings are filled with servers, running continuously and generating heat that has to be managed. So, which also brings us to cooling. And that's something that people are starting to hear more about. Water usage. Some data centers use water as part of their cooling systems. Now, some of that water is reused in a closed system depending on the design, but at scale, water can still be part of the environmental footprint. So again, this just isn't only about electricity, it's about the entire system. Now, one thing that is changing, and changing quickly, is efficiency. The technology behind AI is improving. We're getting more performance for less energy. Modern chips can do far more than older systems and do it way more efficiently. We're also seeing smaller and more targeted AI models, and in some cases, those models can run locally on a laptop or on a desktop. Now, I do want to be very clear. Those local models are not as powerful as the large cloud-based systems that many of us are using, but they are improving quickly and they're very useful in the right situations. And there's an important point here for schools. We already have computers sitting on our desks. When some of those devices get replaced, the newer ones will be more efficient and more capable. In some cases, they can handle AI tasks locally. So instead of always sending everything out to a large data center, some of our work can happen on a device that we already have. And that matters because you're not adding a completely new system, you're using something that already exists that you are going to use anyway. Now here's where we need to be careful because there's also a lot we don't fully know yet. We don't fully know the long-term environmental impact of AI. We don't know how usage will scale. There is something called the rebound effect. When something becomes more efficient, people often use more of it. So even if an individual use becomes more efficient, total usage can still increase. And then there's another piece that deserves attention, e-waste, because this isn't just about energy, it's about hardware. AI is increasing the demand for more powerful systems, and that can speed up replacement cycles. So the question becomes, what happens to the old devices, the old hardware? Now there are some positives. Devices do get reused, passed down, resold, repurposed, and recycling these devices is improving, but demand is also rising. So we're still trying to figure out that full balance. There's also something else that matters, and it matters a lot: where the energy comes from. Not all electricity has the same environmental impact. Some regions rely heavily on fossil fuels. Others use nuclear, hydro, or even lower emission sources. There are even some conversations about placing data centers in locations where energy is cleaner and cooling is more efficient. You ought to take a look at what they are thinking about maybe doing in Iceland. So the impact isn't the same everywhere. And this is where we need to be thoughtful, because sometimes decisions get made around AI that sounds responsible, but they may not be fully thought through. I was part of a group where AI note-taking tools were not allowed in the online meetings because of the environmental concerns. That was the reasoning. And I understand the instinct. But when you think through, generating a small set of notes uses very little energy, whereas rewatching a full meeting over and over by many participants, it also for like an hour or 2 hour time, that uses more energy. So in that case, using AI for note-taking would have actually saved energy. This isn't about calling out that decision or a decision. It's about recognizing something bigger, that we all have to be careful about assumptions, because sometimes what sounds reasonable isn't always what it actually is. So we're seeing this in other areas too. There are fast food restaurants that are now using AI systems to take drive-through orders. And what's interesting is that it's not just the technology, but it's about the system around it. Orders can be more accurate, which means less food waste, less rework, fewer inefficiencies. So when technology changes how work is done, the environmental impact just isn't about the tool, it's about everything around it. So when we step back, AI does not exist in isolation. It replaces things, or it changes how things are done. So the question becomes, compared to what? And I think that's one more layer here. Sometimes this turns into an all or nothing thinking. Avoid it completely, or just accept it. And what I want to say, and I want to say this clearly, if someone decides that they are not comfortable using AI because of the environmental impact, I respect that. That is thoughtful. But it is also fair to acknowledge that not engaging it at all may come with some trade-offs. So the goal isn't one direction, it's finding a middle ground, being thoughtful about how we use technology overall. So what does this mean for us in schools? It means that when students ask these questions, that's a win. Our job is not to give them a simple answer because truly there's not one. Our job is to help them think, to understand trade-offs, to ask better questions. So, if a student asks, is AI bad for the environment? A fair answer might be that it has an impact, that impact is real, it's changing, and we're still learning. And then, the most important part, let's think about it together. Because in the end, this isn't just about AI. It's about the kind of thinkers we're helping our students become. And if they're asking questions like this, we are on the right track.